So I'm very glad to be having another Zoom conversation. This time, it's a little bit outside of my general antiquarian field. It is going to be on the subject of bookbinding. And I'm going to be talking with the bookbinder and artist, Louise Bescond, whose bookbinding and work I absolutely love and really just wanted to share with my YouTube audience. So I have some questions for her about her masterful technique, her artistry, her inspiration, and I hope that she'll share some of her work. So I hope that you enjoy her responses. So it is my pleasure to introduce Louise Bescond, a bookbinder that I have actually never met in person, but I have been a great fan of her work on Instagram and followed her work online. So I wanted to see her amazing workshop. I would say I'm not one who believes necessarily in hypnosis, waving a pocket watch in front of one's face. But I have to say, when I see you sew a headband, that's as hypnotic as I can possibly imagine. It's truly a work of art. So I'll let you do the introduction for yourself. So give us a bit about your background as a bookbinder, where you grew up, how you got into the art.
Thank you so much for having me and for your invitation. And actually, I'm French, and I was born in the suburb of Paris in 1984. And from middle-class family, my parents were a teacher, French and history teacher, and I had some really regular and classical formation, meaning school and college, and until the French baccalaureate. And at that moment, I was specialized more in literature and arts, and I had a teacher who as an exercise, proposed us to do the concours to enter the applied arts school. And I did that during the year. So when the opportunity arrived, I presented the concours, and I got in. So it was a surprise. It was a 1 year of preparation and in applied arts school in Paris. And after that 1 year, you have to choose the formation you wanted to do. And I didn't know where to go, so I do the open days. And that's where I met bookbinding. I went to the École Estienne, which is the school of arts for books like illustration, engraving, and bookbinding. And I had really no idea that existed. And I saw, bookbinding, old books, what is that? And I entered the classroom, and it was really like a shock. And because there were books and they were work of art too, it was really craft making in connection with literature, also unique pieces and part of a creation, because the idea is to propose some kind of personal reading of the book when you create a design. And I was 19 years old, and I said, this is what I want to do with my life. And so I got in, and it was only 2 years because this is how the formation was cut during the years. So now it's only 2 years. And after those 2 years, it was really, really hard at the beginning. Like, it was so complicated. Technically, I wasn't the best in my promotion, and it was so hard to cut things nicely. And because I really believe that if you want to do one-of-a-kind bespoke creation bindings, just like haute couture for the dresses, and you have to have a perfect technique. This is the #1 condition, because if you have beautiful ideas for the design and the technique doesn't follow, it doesn't work well. So at that moment, I heard about La Cambre in Brussels, which still had by the time a 5 years training. And so I asked for the equivalency of the 2 years I already done, and I went to La Cambre in Brussels, where I live now. And this is where, when I arrived in Brussels in 2005, and I did the 3 years training to get my master in bookbinding. And I stayed here because the life is cheaper and it was easier to live here than to live in Paris.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I find it sort of remarkable, I would say, that you're a young woman at 19. And, you know, it's sort of like when you're going to learn piano, or you want to be a professional, you know, if you want to do figure skating, you don't start at 19. These are professions that require the highest level technique if you want to consider it a career. So starting relatively late, you know, in that type of technical profession must be intimidating. And when did you actually, I mean, so at this period, you decided you would pursue it actually as a profession quite early on?
Yes, yes. And it was a chance. Actually, it's funny that you say I was so late, because regarding other bookbinders, many people start much later in their life.
Well, I didn't mean
like as a second career.
Yeah.
Yes, because it's hard to believe that you can make a living of it. It's also not very sexy. Like if you want to make art and crafts, and when you're young, you don't feel like you want to stay with old books and alone in your studio doing sections and do stuff like that. So actually, most of the time, it's nice and refreshing to hear that you were old, because most of the time say you were so young when you started.
Well, I just meant from the aspect of a technical profession.
That's perfect.
You know, an apprenticeship.
That's perfect.
It does require maturity too, what you do particularly, because, you know, matching, they say you don't write the great novel when you're a teenager, because it requires a certain level of sophistication and experience, especially reading literature and books. If you want to use the material of the book itself, you know, to reflect in the artistry of the binding, you know, it requires, you know, like I say, sophistication. How did you feel, you know, when I started out in the book business, for instance, I was attracted to old, dirty volumes. I wasn't really, you know, keen on fancy book bindings. I met years ago Michael Wittock, who has a book binder.
Yes, of course.
And he sort of introduced me to some of his collection, you know, 20-something odd years ago, and he would show me the works of, you know, Paul Bonnet and the Sunburst bindings, or Rose Adler. Some of these fabulous,
my favorites.
Yeah, some of these fabulous French binders of the 20th century. And the history of French bookbinding since the Renaissance has been one of, you know, perfection and experimentation. So I would imagine all of that was especially intimidating, becoming essentially a French bookbinder.
Yeah, it was. And to be completely honest, on the very first year of my training, I had something like 3 months of emptiness and feeling the mountain above, like knowing this was going to be a lifetime work. And I wasn't sure I could do it, but I had no idea what to do else. And I was drained to that spot. And when I decided to do it, saying, okay, it's step by step, one day after another, learning one of the 8, it needs some 80 steps to do one binding. And it's really super complicated, and each step is a special gesture and complicated articulation with the others. It's a whole, really. And when I decided I wanted to do it, I was really okay with myself saying, I am not going to do that job to do a small series. I won't do half leather binding with corners and marble papers. I say that because I had 1 month of training in what we call in French atelier de reliure courante, which means, and it's really, I have huge respect for those people. Like, it's a completely different job, and in no way I would be able to do 30 binding series and outing, like, I don't know, 1,000 binding a year. That's crazy.
Yeah, bookbinding is split, of course, between very commercial bookbinding.
Just like when you make furniture. Yes, I most of the time I use the parallel with woodworking, because it's jobs that people know much better. When you're a woodworker, you can work on small series, making furniture and help with machines, or you can do only restoration, or you can do unique pieces all by hand, and you will make maybe one per year. And this is how I do bookbinding. And I was really okay with that, saying if I cannot do it like that, I will do something else. And in my young years, just after graduating, I had some 4 years, yes, almost 5, with almost no job, working as a part-time waitress and doing small series and so on. And every 3 months I was saying, okay, maybe I will have to stop. And I didn't want to get down on my expectations. Talking about great novel, I really had super high expectations. And I was thinking maybe I will use my skills elsewhere, in making furniture, for example, or bags. But I was drained to unique pieces, creation, and all by hand, because my grandfather was a jewelry maker.
Right.
At-home jewelry maker, like small part of a huge house. He was making small pieces for Hermes. And I was really in love with the fact that you can do all by hand. And voilà, so I hope it answers your question.
And now you have a workshop in Brussels.
Yes. Yes.
Because basically that makes you a bookbinder and an entrepreneur, because it's difficult to have your own workshop. I imagine equipment, materials are all expensive. It's not an easy journey setting yourself up as a business for that as well, especially when you're an artist.
Yes, it came one day after another, because at the beginning I didn't have the machines, so I bought them one by one. As I got the commissions, I could buy some furniture too, and that I started in. That's one of the reasons I stayed in Brussels, because the rents by the time were quite cheap, and I could have a large flat where I could live and have my home studio. And from the very beginning, I never had an open shop. I don't work with walking by clients. I only work with direct contacts and commissions. And I had the chance at the beginning in 2008, when I was just graduating, to meet Pierre Waluzinski, who was by the time a bookseller in Paris, in Librairie Nicaise. And he gave me some work, which he liked. And he said, okay, in a few years, when we will have enough pieces, we will make an exhibition. And in 2013, he made that exhibition, which was my first one.
Sure.
Yes, and at that time I met some clients, and the one client who really changed everything was Michel Scognamillo, and now he's a bookseller on his own. But by that time, he was a part-time bookseller in a amazing Parisian library, bookshop, but he was also the curator of Pierre Berger's library, and he bought 2 bindings for Pierre Berger, and after that Pierre Berger asked me to make some bindings for his library, and that was really,
that must have been an honor.
It was crazy. Yes, and it was also, it's some kind of mythical figure because it was the most beautiful collection ever. He was financial guidance and companion of Yves Saint Laurent, and they had an art collection together. And he never commissioned any binding to any bookbinder. He only bought some finished binding. So in the small milieu, people knew that I was the only one making bindings for him.
Wow.
And when the bindings came out for the sales, it was amazing. And that was the turning point in 2014. Yeah, so it was quite a long road, you see, from getting out of school.
Right out of the Renaissance, you got your famous patron and
yes, exactly, it works like that. Yes, it works like that. Or like a painter, you need to have a gallerist to show your work.
So I want to ask you what, and I'd love to see some of your bindings, I'm sure people are anxious to see what makes a signature, makes a Louise Bescond binding. What would you say is, like I said, if you were talking about Bonnet, you'd see these sunburst patterns in a binding, you can immediately recognize a Paul Bonnet binding. So what makes your binding stand out?
I work always with the same material. I work with natural calf leather, which is an ancient material because it's from Renaissance, actually. And I stamp it and I dye it. So I alter its textures and colors. And I never work with mosaic or only tooling. I work in a much more texture and shades of color way. So it's difficult for me to say that I have a stamp or a particular style, but of course through the years I can see that people recognize my work as special on its own, and voila. So shades of color and texture.
There's sometimes some of your bindings have a metallic quality.
Yes, of course, that's
which stands out.
I forgot that. I have a really hard time helping myself from putting gold and palladium and white gold all over the place. Yes.
And a unique way. I mean, a very natural form, sprinkles, and
Yes, powdered and yes, and I do that with colors too. Also, what became those past years my signature, and I really have to insist on that, is the edge gilding, which I don't do myself. There are a few parts of the work that I don't do myself because just like in haute couture, you cannot do all by yourself and be excellent at it. You have to give to some other masters, and actually edge gilding is super complicated if you want to do it perfectly. And I have to insist on it because my edge gilded are gilded on decal edges, which means the 3 sides and not only the head, but also the gutter and the tail, and on decal edges. And for a bibliophile, it's really important for 2 reasons, because edge gilding with gold is the best way to protect the volume from the dust and also humidity. But if you completely cut the edge to the larger part of the book block, you smallen the book. And in a bibliophilic point of view, especially for the French, it's a nightmare because the book loses its value.
Yeah.
But if you want to gild the edges on decal edges at the larger of the volume, you have to fill in the blanks and the shorter pages, and it's a incredible work, and actually we have in France the very last master able to do it, and is the only one in the world, because only in France that technique was used during the 20s by a master named Koch, who was working for exactly Paul Bonnet and Rose Adler. So this is for the, as you have such a specialist audience, I would like to, I wanted to give you that.
Oh, yeah, that's fabulous to know. Yeah, I'm always amazed, even, you know, Edgegilding is a lost art form in and of itself. I mean, they used to charge an extraordinary sum years ago that people don't appreciate, you know, to gild the edges of a book. You know, a Mark Twain volume would come out in several forms, and very few would come out with gilded edges, and you'd have to pay several dollars additional, which is very significant.
Yes.
To have,
Yes.
but, so do I get to see some of your bindings?
Yes, so I have to say that the problem, as I work in only 2 commissions, is that when the bindings are done, they leave the studio. And
Sure.
I happen to have one finished binding that I made for myself, the only one. So you're lucky to see.
With scarcity.
And after that, I can show you some pictures of the catalog, but of course,
and of course, I'm going to direct people.
It's not the same. Of course, it's not the same. So I'm going to back up here. Voila. So this, I hope the light is okay. So French classical high-hand bindings always come in chemise and étui, and so chemise and slipcase, and it is part of the job. It really, it comes with it, and they have to be as refined and as beautifully done as the rest. Voila. Up. So this is quite representative of my work, actually. I hope the light is okay.
Yeah, we can see the dyed calf.
Yes. So dyed calf leather, full calf leather, classical 5 cords French binding, no raised cords, flat back. First, because since 19th century, and the most beautiful binder of all time, including the last century, the best of us all was Lortic. He was the personal binder to Charles Baudelaire. And he's the one who made the most beautiful raised cord bindings.
Right.
And they were the most beautiful because they were false. Okay, so flat, long spine actually is better to for the finesse of the work, but also the durability of the work. When you have raised cords, they get rubbed and so on.
Every book dealer knows this.
Yeah.
That is the enemy of a bookbinding, the raised cords. It's always bumped and bruised and damaged.
Yes, yes, and super fragile. And
I've come across so many Lortic bindings. I'm always looking for them. I don't know if I've said to myself that they're false on the spine.
They are, because they are so thin, really, like razor sharp. And
I'll have to look more closely next time. That's something.
Yes, and really, on the technical plan, they're the most amazing because he had such a large studio with specialized craft people working in it. So voila. It's powdered with colors and with gold. It's textured with a zinc plate with a satin finish. Only in French we say aquatinte. It's engraving technique that gives a soft grain, and I put a soft grain on the plate to stamp the leather so it has the finish. And on the inside, so of course the 3 edges are gilded on decal edges. So I don't know if maybe you can see how it makes some kind of,
yeah, you can see some of the shine. It's not, the video is not perfect, but I'm also, of course, going to direct people to your Instagram to see some of your work and photos.
The pictures are better there. And on the inside, I made some lacquered gold paper, voila, and suede goatskin fly leaf.
You say it's 80 parts to pull together in one symphony. It really is, because you have to do it, worry about every tiny aspect of the art.
Yes. And of course, the main purpose is to protect the book. So it was a typical French paperback. It's one of my favorite Marguerite Duras.
Wow. I have a question for you. When you go about your work, like an old master artist, when you're doing a painting, for instance, you paint, you can change the canvas. How does it work in bookbinding? You make an error, your direction changes. How do you compensate or switch gears?
Yes, you because actually the leather is no paper or canvas, and it has its own chemistry, and between the stamping, the dyeing, the fact that it's a technical material, you have to be able to bend it, to pair the leather and so on. Most of the time I have to adapt the results, and it's part of the job to be able to feel when you have to change the route from what you decided in the beginning. And it was part of my training in Paris, which was short, but really I am still building my universe around what I learned in École Estienne with my teacher Odile Douai, to be able to welcome the accident and to work with the hazard.
So you're saying it tugs and pulls at you, the material, in different directions than you intended.
Yes, and
not like having paints. I mean, it's really, you know,
sometimes you have something in your mind and you go that way, and when you meet the wall, like, no way. And you have to improvise and find something different, and it happens all the time. Like the last binding I made this month, I completely changed the route, because in the end, and this is what I say to my clients, because it's quite complicated actually it's a huge responsibility, because it is so long to do. It's super expensive.
How long does it take you to do a binding?
I'm sorry?
How long did it take you to do that binding?
That one, it's some 80 hours, more or less, to work, but it takes place on several months, because there are press times, there are people I work with, there is the time of the creation. I need time for think about the stuff, but of actual work it's 80 hours, and there are the materials, leather, gold, all the what cost the making. So it's quite a cost to make a binding like that, and I'm fully aware of it. And but I cannot give maquettes to my client. I don't know if you say that in English, or sketches of the project, because I don't work with mosaic, so I cannot make a plan of what I do. I can discuss.
They really have to trust you without it. It's almost like
yes.
a story.
Yeah, I can discuss the colors, the atmosphere, and because I have a few bindings done that are known, I can say something like this or something like that. I can do some figurative work.
How do you come up with your artistic vision? You take the work, is it a book you're familiar with? How do you balance? How do you decide what approach to take?
Until now, I don't decide. The client decides. They come, they ring my phone, they send me an email, they bring the book and they say, I would like you to bind that. And until now, I only decided if do I take the job or I don't take it. And until now, I always take it, because you have to work.
I mean, but do they know more or less what they want in terms of color and style, or do you?
Yes, of course we can discuss that, because if someone really hates green, or doesn't want at all a figurative design, which I can do. Of course, I hear the will of the client, but I also tell them I can give you an idea of the shades of color or the style of the design, but from here, you have to trust me.
Sure.
You have to trust me until the point I can feel free to improvise if needed. Because in the end, the only thing that matters is that the design in itself holds it himself together. I don't know how to say it other way.
Integrity to the work.
Yes, and sometimes I don't want to put gold on it, and I have to, because
Sure.
it doesn't work the other way, or I have to put a color or to change directions. And so because now I have plenty of work and super long delays because I'm doing most of the thing by myself, and so I do only 20 to 25 bindings a year, and because I have so much books waiting for me, I actually can refuse books that I don't like. It didn't happen much those past years, but a good example would be collaborationist writers, like, no,
Sure.
I'm sorry. I find a polite way to say, maybe you should find someone else to do it.
Yeah, the two books that you gave for Pierre Berger,
Yeah.
do you remember what the books were?
Yes, of course. Actually, there were 4, and I totally remember them.
What were the books?
Le siège de Jérusalem, de Max Jacob, and with 3 engravings of Pablo Picasso, Kahnweiler printer on Japanese paper.
So they were beautiful books as
yeah,
well. So.
crazy, amazing book.
Yeah.
Like, I was shaking. Never in my life I was entrusted with such an expensive book. And the other one was also amazing. Oda a Walt Whitman by Federico Garcia Lorca, with an original drawing, and it was amazing too. Those were the first 2.
Oh, yeah. So those were splendid examples. So.
Yes, really, really.
So what do you think, Louise, is the future of bookbinding and somebody like you in such an artistic field? I mean, this is an age where everybody's obsessed with NFTs and digital art. What is the future of a traditional craft that you're after?
Of course, it's not as brilliant as it used to be. Because wealthy people used to have beautiful libraries in their apartments, and it's not the case anymore. They might have some contemporary art, but no more books, and clearly not 1,000 worthy books. So not as brilliant, but I am convinced that the mastery you can have by hand is irreplaceable. And I will use again the parallel of fashion design. The mechanic lace didn't kill the by hand lace.
Sure.
If you want really something truly amazingly beautiful, it has to be done by hand. So we are not many, but we are still breathing and still here. Yeah.
Will you be exhibiting any of your bindings in the States?
I would love to. I would love to. And I had the chance to meet Gerald Cloud from the Codex Foundation, because Pierre Waluzinski wrote a paper in the, not the last, but the number of the Codex paper 2 years ago, about our meeting and the exhibition he made in Paris, the first one for me. And we talked a bit with Gerald and said, would you like to come to the Codex Book Fair? And I said, yes, but you have to invite me because I cannot afford to take the plane on my. So if anyone invite me to the States, I would love to come show you my bindings in person here. But sometimes they get exhibited during book fairs because some of the book sellers I work with, they come to California Book Fair or Boston or New York. So I know some people on Instagram, book collectors that actually could touch my bindings in New York and Boston.
We have our New York Book Fair coming up in April, so I'm going to have to scout some of the French dealers to see if I can find an example or two.
Yeah, but I can send you the details if I know they are coming, because it's still COVID, so I'm not sure they will make the trip. But
sure,
next year it's gonna end at some point.
Well, anyway, I think the Zoom session is sort of ending in a minute or something, but I will put all of your links below, so I would encourage everybody to check out your wonderful artistry. Oh, can I see the headband still on your binding?
Yes, of course. I don't know if
it's visible.
Pass well with the camera, but
because the way on Instagram you show videos of your sewing technique, it's so beautiful. So I really want people to see, as you say, one piece of the tapestry. You know how much love and care and artistry you put into these things. So all of that information will be below. So Louise, thank you so much
Adam,
for sharing some of your art, your craft and everything is really appreciated.
Thank you so much for your invitation. It was a pleasure, really. And you're most welcome when you want to, if you ever come to Brussels.
I've been many times. Now, as soon as travel's more free and permitted again, it's easier. I'll definitely make the trip. Wonderful city. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much.